The house stood on a hill overlooking the town. Its presence was both commanding and foreboding, a silent sentinel watching over the lives below. A Victorian mansion shrouded in mist and mystery. The fog clung to its walls like a ghostly veil, hiding secrets that time had long forgotten. It was perfect, or so I thought. The allure of its history and the promise of a new beginning drew me in, but little did I know what awaited me. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving me alone with the silence. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, and I was left standing at the threshold of my new life. I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of dust and time. Each breath I took seemed to pull me deeper into the past, as if the house itself was drawing me in. The house was a labyrinth of dark hallways and shadowy corners. Every turn revealed another passage, another hidden nook, each one whispering tales of those who had walked these halls before me. Each room echoed with emptiness, waiting for life to fill it. The walls seemed to listen, eager to absorb the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the everyday moments that make a house a home. But there was a sense of unease that settled upon me. It was as if the house was watching, waiting to see if I was worthy of its secrets. An unwelcome feeling that I was not alone. Shadows seemed to move just out of sight, and the creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps following me. The house was alive, and it had chosen me as its next inhabitant. As I explored further, I found remnants of the past. Old, dusty furniture covered in cobwebs. Forgotten trinkets that hinted at lives once lived here. Each item told a story, adding to the tapestry of the mansion's history. I lit a candle to chase away the darkness, but its flickering light only seemed to deepen the shadows. The house was a place of contrasts, where light and dark danced together in an eternal waltz. The walls were adorned with old family portraits, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. It was as if the ancestors were watching, judging my every step, deciding if I was fit to uncover the mansion's secrets. A sudden gust of wind blew through an open window, making the curtains flutter like ghostly apparitions. The house seemed to breathe, its very essence intertwined with the elements. I found myself standing at the top of a grand staircase, looking down into the abyss of the unknown. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I felt a strange sense of destiny pulling me forward. Moonlight streamed through a window, illuminating a path before me. It was as if the house was guiding me, showing me the way to uncover its mysteries and perhaps find my own place within its storied walls. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. This was my new beginning, and I was ready to face whatever the house had in store for me. A knock on the door startled me. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. The sound echoed through the quiet house, making my heart race. I hesitated for a moment, wondering who could be visiting at this hour. It was my only neighbor, Mr. Devlin. He lived alone in the house next door, a place that seemed as old and mysterious as he was. I had seen him a few times, always keeping to himself, never engaging in more than a polite nod. He was a frail, unassuming man with wispy white hair and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. His presence was both comforting and unsettling, a paradox that I couldn't quite understand. His eyes, though kind, had a depth that hinted at stories untold. He smiled, a gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was as if he was trying to be friendly, but something held him back. The smile was there, but the warmth was missing, replaced by a shadow of something I couldn't quite place. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he rasped, his voice thin and reedy. It was the first time he had spoken to me directly, and his voice carried a weight that made me shiver. There was something in his tone, a hint of warning or perhaps a plea. I invited him in, trying to ignore the tremor in my hand. It felt like the right thing to do, even though every instinct told me to keep the door closed. Hospitality won over caution, and I stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. He refused, his gaze sweeping over my shoulder and into the depths of the house. His eyes seemed to search for something or perhaps someone. It was as if he was looking for a ghost, a memory that lingered in the shadows. "You have a lovely home," he said, his voice barely a whisper. There was a sincerity in his words, but also a sadness. It was as if he was remembering something lost, a time long gone. His compliment felt like a lament, a reminder of what once was. Just be careful, these old houses, they have memories. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was a warning, but also a piece of advice. Old houses with their creaking floors and whispering walls held on to the past. They remembered everything, the good and the bad. As he turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more about my house than I did. His visit left me with more questions than answers, and a sense of unease that lingered long after he was gone. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of unease intensified. I'd catch glimpses of Mr. Devlin watching me from his window. His face, a pale blur behind the glass, was always watching. My every move scrutinized. My once peaceful walks were now filled with dread. The rustling leaves sounded like whispers, and every shadow seemed to take the shape of Mr. Devlin. He was always there, lurking just beyond my sight. One night I awoke to a sound, a soft scratching at my window. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly approached the window. Peering out into the darkness, I saw nothing. But the scratching continued, a relentless rasp against the glass. Sleep became impossible after that. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind sent shivers down my spine. I was living in a constant state of fear, trapped in my own home. I tried to rationalize my fear. Mr. Devlin was just a lonely old man, harmless. But the doubt gnawed at me. His eyes, his words, his constant presence, it was all too much. I began to avoid him, crossing the street when I saw him, but it was no use. He was everywhere, in the shadows, in the whispers of the wind, watching, always watching. One day, I decided to confront Mr. Devlin. I marched next door, determined to put an end to this nightmare. But as I approached his house, I noticed something strange. The front door was ajar. A chill ran down my spine, but curiosity outweighed my fear. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else. Something metallic. The living room was in disarray, furniture overturned, papers scattered across the floor, and then I saw it. A photograph, lying face down amidst the chaos. I picked it up, my blood turning to ice. It was a picture of a family, a man, a woman, and a young girl. But their faces had been scratched out, leaving only gaping wounds, and then I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach that the man in the photo was Mr. Devlin. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Devlin, his face contorted in a terrifying mixture of rage and longing. "You weren't supposed to see that," he hissed, his voice raspy and weak. He took a step towards me, his hand gripping a pair of gardening shears. The blades glinted menacingly in the dim light. Panic surged through me. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, each beat echoing in my ears. I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my back, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing in, suffocating me with their oppressive presence. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, plunging the room into darkness. The sudden loss of light disoriented me, and I could hear the shattering of glass as the lamp hit the floor. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos around me. I fumbled in the dark, my fingers brushing against cold, unyielding surfaces as I tried to find my bearings. I scrambled to my feet, racing towards the front door. My breath came in ragged gasps, each step feeling like an eternity. The hallway stretched out before me, a seemingly endless tunnel of darkness. I could hear my own footsteps, a frantic rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. The door was my only hope, my only escape from the nightmare that had engulfed me. I could hear Mr. Devlin close behind me, his labored breathing echoing in the darkness. Each breath he took was a reminder of the danger that lurked just a few steps away. His presence was a shadow that loomed over me, a constant threat that spurred me to move faster. The sound of his footsteps, heavy and deliberate, sent chills down my spine. I burst out of the house and into the night, running until my lungs burned and my legs screamed for mercy. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the stifling heat inside. I could feel the rough pavement beneath my feet, each step a painful reminder of my desperation. The world outside was a blur, a dark canvas painted with streaks of fear and urgency. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. The fear that gripped me was enough to keep me moving forward, my eyes fixed on the path ahead. Every instinct screamed at me to keep running, to put as much distance between myself and the house as possible. The night was my ally, its darkness a cloak that shielded me from the horrors behind. I could feel his eyes on my back, watching my every move. It was as if his gaze had a physical weight, pressing down on me, urging me to go faster. The sensation of being watched was almost unbearable, a constant reminder that I was not yet safe. I pushed myself harder, my body fueled by a primal need to survive, to escape the relentless pursuit of Mr. Devlin. I never went back to that house. The memory of that night, of Mr. Devlin's eyes and the photo with the scratched-out faces haunted my dreams. I moved, trying to outrun the fear that had burrowed deep within me, but some wounds run too deep. The fear lingered, a constant shadow in the corner of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even now, years later, I still catch myself looking over my shoulder, searching for that gaunt figure with the haunted eyes. The world seems full of shadows, and every whisper of wind sounds like his voice. Mr. Devlin might be gone, but the Watcher remains.